I'm going to ask everybody to become as quiet as we can so I can introduce our guest speaker. Normally, it's your job to give this biographical sketch of the guest speaker, and then the speaker takes off and talks about things that are important to all of us. But I'm not going to do that, and the reason I'm not going to do that is because I've known Rose for the last 10 years, and she's always been a guest at our great teaching workshop and our Eastern Ontario Institute of Learning in the summer. And I know that part of her message is related to her own background, so it would be simply silly for me to try to cover what she's accomplished. But let me say this, that if we're here to celebrate the college in terms of all of us being involved in helping students to achieve and to grow and to learn and to overcome handicaps in order to become successful, then we picked the appropriate guest speaker for today. And I think you'll agree that her story is not only fascinating, but it's what we need at the end of April when we're a little bit tired and a little bit weary perhaps of the struggle all year long. But her message will get us ready for September in a way that I don't think very few speakers can do. Rose is a graduate of community college as well as a law school and many other things, and she'll tell her wonderful story. And it really is a privilege because, like I say, I've spent almost every summer having Rose come to our institute, and it's a pleasure to welcome her back again to our own college this time, where we get to be selfish and hear her message just for ourselves. So please, everybody, please welcome Rose Adams. Rose?
Wow, you're tall. No, that's okay. I'll just put it down. Thank you, Stuart. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the privilege of being your keynote speaker this afternoon. As Stuart indicated, I'm a graduate of community college. My name is Rose Adams, and I'm a lawyer practicing in Barrie. Why are you having a lawyer as your keynote speaker? No lawyer jokes, but they are a dime a dozen. One of the reasons I've been asked to speak is not because I'm a lawyer, but how I became a lawyer. My story is a little bit different, and in order to share it with you, I've come up with a little acronym. And I see some people have a book or paper in front of them. If you want to grab a pen and jot this down, please feel free to do so. But the acronym is BREATHE. And I came up with this acronym because I was asked to speak at a function similar to this about 4 years ago after receiving the Premier's Award for Outstanding Achievement in Business for community colleges. And I was asked to give a presentation right here in Kingston at this, I think it was actually in this room. And at that time, I was extremely nervous, to say the least. So I wrote myself a note, and all it said was, breathe. I figured if I could do that, I could get through. And then I've used that word repeatedly ever since. For me, the B in breathe stands for background. And that's, as I indicated, primarily the reason why I'm here. Generally speaking, when someone wants to become a lawyer, after high school, they attend university to obtain an undergraduate degree. And after obtaining a 4-year degree, they apply to law school. I didn't have the opportunity to go to university. Instead, I went to community college. And I have to tell you, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And it set the stage for many successes to follow. When I was in law school, a lot of my classmates were the typical silver spoon students. They had come from affluent families, and they didn't have to work to get through school, and they had a whole myriad of family support systems behind them, encouraging them through their studies. I wasn't quite so fortunate. Shortly after I was born, at 6 months of age, my mother was experiencing some challenges, and as a result, she was not able to care for me or my 4-year-old sister. So the Children's Aid removed us from my mother's home. We stayed in a foster home for about 5 months, and then were returned to my mother's care. Unfortunately, my mother's issues persisted, and we were removed from her care about 3 months later, where we were taken to another foster home. We stayed there for just under 6 months and were returned to my mother. Things hadn't changed, so after several months, we were removed by the Children's Aid and placed in yet another foster home. This pattern repeated for the next 7 years. By the time I was 7, I had lived in 9 different foster homes. I had no stability, no consistency, except for my sister. During that 7-year period, we were placed for an entire year with a family in Penetang. Their last name was Adams. So I spent all of kindergarten in the same place with the same students. To me, that was heaven. Unfortunately, after kindergarten, we were removed again, and they couldn't find a home that would take both my sister and I, because my sister was experiencing some challenges of her own. So we were placed in a group home. Now, a group home in downtown Toronto for a little girl who's 6 years old is a pretty scary place. That's where I learned to smoke. That's where I learned to swear. That's where I learned to become independent and take care of myself. Because if I didn't, someone was going to beat the crap out of me. It's a hard lesson to learn at 6. When I was 7, I lived in a foster home with a family in downtown Toronto, and they were very kind. And I thought this was an awesome place to stay. But unfortunately, our duration there was cut short, and I was returned yet again to another home. Finally, we were asked where we wanted to live. After this cycle, the Children's Aid decided that it was not in our best interest to shuffle us from home to home. Unfortunately, it took them 7 years to figure that out. At the age of 7.5, we went to court, and we were asked in an open courtroom in front of our mother whether or not we wanted to be returned to her care or become a Crown ward and live permanently in the foster care system. That was an extremely difficult thing to do, to face my mom and say no. No, I did not want to return to live with her. My older sister, on the other hand, said yes. The Children's Aid decided that it was best to keep us together, and we were placed in a foster home. They asked us where we wanted to go, and I immediately said to Penetang, back to the Adamses, because that was the only place that had really felt like home. When I was 9, I returned to the Adamses along with my sister. When we moved back to Penetang, life in the house was great. Life at school was a little bit different. Students in grade 4 and 5 are slightly more aggressive than students in kindergarten. If any of you have been to Penetang, it's not a multicultural community. So we had to deal with significant racial issues. My sister and I were beat up on a pretty regular basis. We were forced to endure the normal torturings that kids do to each other, but we had some additional difficulties as well. On one occasion in particular, I remember a group of older boys holding us down and actually making us eat dog shit because that was the color of our skin, and they thought it was appropriate. We didn't go home and complain because we were afraid. Not that we would get into trouble, but that we would have to move. Because to me, anything was tolerable as long as I could stay in one place, with one family. The Adamses' agreement with the Children's Aid was that we would stay for a year. I'm happy to say that the Adamses are not very good at keeping their agreements. I stayed for 10 years. And that was home. For me, I had dreams. And I thought, you know, I'm going to show these people, the people in the foster homes I'd been at, the people in the group homes, that I could make something of myself. I was not going to end up like my mother on welfare. I was not going to end up dependent on the system in any way. In fact, I think I decided I was not going to end up dependent on anyone. That can be a problem when you grow up and you have to rely on other people. But I decided to become fiercely independent. I excelled at school, both public school and high school. I wanted desperately to go to university. And by the time I was in grade 9, I knew I wanted to become a lawyer. I thought, I want to help people with challenges that they may face. And I took law in high school, as well as all my regular classes. I participated in track and field, basketball. I was captain of the cheerleaders in high school. I played flute in the school band. I was a bit of an overachiever. Not because I was necessarily good at all these things, but I wanted to do anything possible to show that I was worth keeping. Because for me, I was always trying to prove myself. Always trying, on some subtle level, to say, please don't send me away. After I finished high school, I was told by the Children's Aid that they did not have funding for university, and the Adamses were not prepared to commit their own funds to send me off to school. So my only option was community college. I moved from Penetang to Barrie and enrolled in Georgian college. And I thought, hey, if I can't become a lawyer, I can do the next best thing. I can become a legal secretary. So I signed up for the 2-year legal, now it's called legal assistant program, but back then it was just legal secretary. And I moved off and got my own apartment and lived in Barrie. When I enrolled, I had to use my legal name. And my legal name was not Adams, but I'd been known as Rose Adams for a long time. So I hired a lawyer and took all of my savings and had my name legally changed to Adams. I thought that was a great thing, and I thought the Adamses would be happy that I was really now part of their family. I knew that my biological mother wouldn't be happy, but I thought it was the best thing for me. You see, the entire 10 years that I lived with the Adamses, we still had visitation with my mother. So once a month, a social worker would come pick us up at school and drive us to meet my mother for lunch. My mother, unfortunately, had never come to terms with the fact that I chose not to live with her. And from the age of 7 onward, she constantly told me how disappointed she was in me and that I had made a mistake and it was going to come back to haunt me. This is a lot of guilt and pressure to put on a kid. Finally, at 10, I said I didn't want to have visits anymore. It was really hard to handle the emotions that were being put on me. My older sister, on the other hand, loved her access visits with my mom, and she continued. As a result of our childhood, my sister experienced some of her own struggles. And she ended up suffering some spinal meningitis, which left her with a bit of brain damage. As a result of that, She ended up doing poorly in school and deciding that the life for her was the same life that my mom had shown her. So my sister quit school at the age of 16, moved to downtown Toronto, and unfortunately now at the age of 48, she's lived on welfare her entire life. I didn't want to repeat that pattern. I didn't think I was destined to follow those footsteps, but nobody else seemed to agree with me. When I went to college, the Adamses said, "Probably won't last." So they told me to just get a job, pay for myself, because they weren't really going to spend their money to put me through school. I got a job at the Queen's Hotel, working nights. I also got another job cleaning homes on weekends. And in fact, some of the homes I cleaned were those of fellow students because they were from Barrie and still lived at home when they went to college. And it's pretty humiliating when you come out from cleaning somebody's toilet to see a classmate watching TV or playing in the backyard. After my first year of college, I got a job at Georgian College in the administration department. I got a job as a junior secretary for John Sayso. John was the vice president of administration. And my job for him that summer was to type letters and to get coffee and to run errands. But to me, it was awesome to actually work as a secretary and get some experience. During that summer, my mom, Bernice Adams, came to visit me for lunch. And that was unusual for her. She had never done that before. And she said, "We really need to talk." So on this late June afternoon, we're having lunch at a restaurant in Barrie, and she said to me, "So, I understand you've gotten to know your biological mother." And I said, "Yes. I figure now I'm 19 years of age, I'm sort of stronger, and I think I can handle a relationship with her. Besides, I was excited about getting to know my younger sister. Because while Teresa, my older sister, and I were in foster care, my mother had a third daughter. And Shannon stayed home and grew up as an only child in downtown Toronto with my mom. And here I am, 19 years old, with a 15-year-old sister that I hardly knew. So I wanted to get to know her and to show her that there was another example out there for her future. I spent a few weekends in Toronto visiting my mom, but we really didn't have anything in common. And in fact, at that time of my life, I still called her Sharon. On the other hand, my younger sister and I bonded instantly and became fast friends. My older sister, she and I grew further and further apart, although I did see her Christmas and some holidays. So here we are at lunch, and my mom, the only person I'd really called mom, said to me, "Well, I don't like it. When Teresa spent time with your mother, look what happened to her." I tried to reassure my mom that I was different, that I was stronger, and that I was not going to end up on welfare. I was not going to end up a disappointment to her. Throughout my life, I've always wanted to be a part of the family, part of a family. And for me, the Adamses were my family. Yes, it was obvious to everyone who met us that we weren't related by blood because they're Caucasian, and well, I'm not. So when they introduced me, they wouldn't call me their daughter. They would say, "This is our foster daughter, Rose." Or they would say, Peggy, my sister, or Tim and Dan, my brothers, would say, "This is our kind of half-sister, sort of, well, yeah, I guess she's our sister, Rose." Or "This is our foster sister." but no one would really say, hey, this is my sister, or this is my daughter. And I could feel something slipping away during this lunch with my mom, and I wasn't wrong. My mom said to me, well, your dad and I have been talking, and we don't think it's right that you have two families. Now, at that point, she could have asked me to choose, but she didn't. She had already chosen for me. And my mom said, well, now that you've gotten to know your biological mother, good luck. She said, that's it. She would pack up my things, and I was not welcome to come home. Here I am, the summer after my first year of college, off on my own, supposed to be having the summer of my life. And I found myself instead all alone. Did I have the evening or weekend to deal with it? No, I was on my lunch. I went back to work, visibly shaken. And my boss, John Sayso, took one look at me and said, what happened to you? I explained to him what my mom had said, and I assured him that she was not bluffing, that I had seen that home, my room, my things, for the last time. My world came crashing down 10 years after I thought I'd finally found home. It was just exactly like when I was a kid, and somebody would come to the door and say, it's time to move. I looked to John for some sympathy, some support. I told him what happened, and he said to me, so what does her opinion matter? He said, if she believes you're going to end up on the system and not succeeding, then that's her problem. Your life is not limited by her expectations. Your life is up to you. And instead of sympathizing or feeling sorry for me, John empowered me. And he taught me the R in the letter breathe, which is responsibility. From that point forward, I knew that I was responsible for me. If I wanted to succeed, I'd have no one else to blame. I could have stopped right then and there and said, poor me, I have no choice. My cards have been dealt, and that's the life I'm now going to have to lead. But I chose not to. I chose to take John's words to heart and take full responsibility for my life. And to me, that meant the E in breathe, which is education. Here I was, already finished my first year of college, and trust me, I had had a good time. I sort of passed most of my classes. I was on the school basketball team. I also played hockey. I was also president of the student council. I had a lot of fun, but I hadn't really put 100% effort into my education. Well, things had to change. My second year of Georgian college, I really hit the books. If I was going to be a legal secretary, then I was going to be the best legal secretary I could be. And I had a secret weapon. During the summer I worked with John, I noticed one day on the wall in his office a diploma, and it said Osgoode Hall Law School. So I asked him, are you a lawyer? And he said, yeah. I went back to school as a mature student, and I became a lawyer. I said, well, how does that work? And he said, well, you don't have to have a university degree to get into law school. If you reach a certain age and you write your LSAT and get in the top 2% for the country, you might get an interview. And if you're one of the 1,200 people who gets an interview, you might get a position. So I thought, hey, That doesn't sound so hard. So I finished my second year of Georgian college, moved to Toronto, got a job as a legal secretary, and I hated it. It was awful. It was the worst job I've ever had. But I knew from the newspaper that you had to have 1 year's experience to get a good job, because that's what all the ads said, minimum 1 year experience. So I started on February 17th, 1985, and I quit that job on February 17th, 1986. And I took my 1 year experience and I applied elsewhere. And I got a job at a law firm and worked there. And in the evenings, I went to night school to become a law clerk. It was a 2-year program in the evenings, and I thought, hey, now armed with a law clerk certificate, I can get a different job. I got another job with a larger law firm as a law clerk. Decided to do that for several years until it got to the point where my boss said to me, why do I even bother coming in some days? And I thought, hey, I think it's time. So I told him of my plan to apply to law school, and he supported me 100%. I studied for the LSAT, and I wrote it. I must have received the grades that were acceptable because I received an interview. And I thought, if I can just get in front of them, I'll convince them that they need me at Osgoode Hall. Didn't quite work like that. I was more like, oh, please, please pick me, please. But they did. And I started law school September 1991. During my first year of law school, I joined the Black Law Students Association of Canada. And it was brought to my attention very quickly that I was black. And you might think that's kind of funny or that I'm being facetious, but I'm really not, because I didn't grow up really being able to connect with the black community. I was 25 years old and I joined a pageant because I wanted to meet other black people. So I met a group of young girls and we had a great summer. So here I am in law school and they had an organization. I thought, hey, I wanted to find out a little bit about it. So I joined this group, and I'm not really sure why, because I'm not an activist by nature. And there was a conference in Nova Scotia that February. So I went to the conference at Dalhousie and I met a whole bunch of students. And it was a really fun time. Nothing came of it, and I returned to Toronto and finished off my first year of law school. But during the summer, after my first year of law school, I decided, hey, there's a reason I went to Halifax. And I think I better pursue that reason. But I'm not going to tell you yet what that reason was. For me, I mentioned the E in education is really important. And after that is the A. The A is for action. Because you can hope and dream and plan and pray all you want. But if you don't take steps to put those plans into action, then they're just pipe dreams. So I made a list when I was probably about 2 months after I got dumped by my mom. And I made a list of all the things I wanted to do and wanted to accomplish. They included riding a motorcycle, learning to play the piano, writing a book, becoming a motivational speaker, become a lawyer, learn to fly a plane, learn to speak French, and a bunch of other things. Oh, learn to sing, but I crossed that one off very quickly. Everything else on that list, well, the French, I'm halfway there, and the book is in the works, but everything else I did. Thank you. And I decided, hey, I can teach other people how to set goals and take action and set up a realistic plan for themselves. Now, since then, I've been really crazy in the lists that I write. But I've decided it doesn't matter if I have a list of 20 things and I only achieve 3. It's 3 more than maybe the person sitting beside me. So I have a pretty long list at the moment. And about 4 years ago, I decided to add to my list. And it's funny how the list, I still have my original one when I was 19, and most of the lists since then. But 4 years ago, I decided to add to my list, and I added learn to trust and get married. Well, recently I met someone who's taught me to trust, and this summer, getting married. Okay, that wasn't even very loud. I'm 44 years old and I'm getting married for the first time. And, somebody today at lunch commented about, well, why did it take so long? And that's the T in breathe. Teach. And you know what? We teach people how to treat us. And for the longest time, I didn't teach people to treat me very well. I kept finding myself in relationships that I didn't want to be in, but couldn't figure out why. Well, it's what I was putting out there. Because for the longest time, I didn't think I deserved a good family, a good life, a happy future. Because somewhere, my past was still living inside me. And if you don't believe 100% that you deserve something, you're never going to get it. I spent a lot of time retraining the most important person in my life. That was me. I taught myself to love me 100%. And then things just fell into place. During that process, I had a lot of help and a lot of support from other people. And some of those people were people just like you. I still, to this day, many years, 25 years since graduating college. Oh my God. No, it can't be 25. I failed math. I still have as friends some of the instructors from Georgian College, some of the people who encouraged me along the way. Because when I decided in my second year to really put some effort into school, it was noticed. People didn't know why I was so determined or what challenges I had, but it was noticed. In fact, one year, it was October, while I was at Georgian College, I started getting a lot of invitations to people's homes for dinner. Even instructors and parents of students would invite me, because it became apparent fairly quickly that I had no money and I had no food. I lived for 3 weeks on popcorn and cherry Kool-Aid. It's not fun. But people took the time to notice and to help me out. And that's the H in breathe, to help. Who's in your life right now that you're consciously helping? Obviously, all of the students here at St. Lawrence are benefiting from your help. But who else? If you really stop to think about it, you're probably helping a lot of people and you may not even realize it. Take the time to appreciate yourself and to give yourself a pat on the back. After I finished college, I realized that since I couldn't do it without the help of others, I better make sure that I incorporated into my life a system of helping those less fortunate than myself. There was one Christmas in particular when I was in law school, and my roommate was going home for Christmas. I was single, and since the Adamses still weren't speaking to me, I had nowhere to go. And I started to feel sorry for myself. So I thought, what am I going to do? Well, I called the Scott Mission and volunteered my time. I thought, if I could go help other people Surely I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. And I was right. There's nothing more empowering than to help people in a worse situation than you. Since then, I've made it a point to continuously incorporate helping. I work at a soup kitchen on Monday evenings for 3 hours. People say, well, how do you do that? How do you find the time? How can you afford it? And I say, well, you know what? I can't afford not to. Now, life isn't all about sacrifice and pain, and I have to say, I'm extremely happy. There's a lot of good stuff going on in my life. And that's because of the E at the end of breathe. Because if you don't have that E, you've got breath. And that's probably what we do quite often. Take a shallow breath. Do you ever notice that sometimes you're out of air? You just need a little bit more? Well, add the E to breath, and you've got breathe. Can everybody take a deep breath? Breathe. It feels different. It feels energizing. If you can remember on a continual basis to add the E to breath, you've got an entirely different situation. So for me, the E stands for enjoy. Because I'm not here to be a martyr. I'm not here to feel sorry for myself. I'm here with the same gifts and privileges as everyone else to enjoy my life. And so I thought, how am I going to enjoy it? Well, financial health, that's a good thing. So I thought, I'm going to take that education and I'm going to take the tools I have and I'm going to prepare for my financial future. Now, there was lots of little voices in the back of my head saying, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, you know. Or, look at that car. Wonder who they stepped on to get their money. And all those little negative things that I had learned over the years about money. Well, they're not true. You can have a financially abundant life and a significant amount of integrity at the same time. In fact, the more financial abundance you have, the more you can help other people. And when I was able to reconcile those two ideas, then the sky's the limit. I'm certainly not rich, but I'm not eating popcorn and red or cherry Kool-Aid for dinner anymore. Well, except physical health. What good is having a bank account if you don't have the health to enjoy it? So, as we all do, struggle with exercise. I'm working on it. But I'm really trying to make sure that I remain healthy. And that takes sometimes as much work as trying to make sure you're financially healthy. Physical health doesn't come naturally for me. It's hard work, but it's worth it. The other thing is psychological health. And for me, that was the biggest obstacle because there was a lot of baggage that I was carrying around for many, many years. I might have seemed together and confident on the outside, but I labeled myself an insecure extrovert because on the inside, I was torn up and I was hurting and I was scared and I was the least confident person you would want to meet. I was extremely needy, and in fact, most of the men will appreciate this. When you were single, did you ever go on a date with somebody and this chick was just really needy and you think, no, I don't want anything to do with her? Well, that was me. Now you know why I'm 44 and was still single. I really was, because every ounce of energy I was putting out there on a subconscious level was, please like me, please be kind to me, I'll be whoever you need me to be. Please love me. And that is not a good way to lead your life. I wasn't aware of it at the time. But after some work, I realized that, hey, I only needed one person to love me. And as soon as she figured out that I was great, as I said earlier, life got better. And I'm now truly my best supporter and my best friend. There's other people around, and in fact, the more positive and true you are to yourself, the more you attract that. And then into my life came an amazing group of friends. Also into my life came an amazing family. Because I said earlier, I ended up in Halifax for a conference, but there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. So I got thinking, nothing happens by chance. Why was I there? Well, I knew my biological father lived in Nova Scotia. I knew his name was Charles Tynes, and I knew that back in the 60s he was a professional boxer. But that's all I knew, because see, he had left my mother 3 months before I was born. I decided to ask one of the students at Dalhousie to do some research for me and look up articles about him in the newspaper. So I called a student and I said, "Hi Cheryl, do you remember me?" And we chatted for a bit. And I said, "I'm writing a paper for my sports and entertainment law class, and I'd like to do an article on a boxer from Truro, Nova Scotia. And could you do some research and send me some newspaper clippings?" She said, "Sure." Why she said sure, I don't know. It was the summer, it was a holiday. I wasn't actually in class at all, but she didn't question me. She just said sure. She said, "What's his name?" I said, "Charles Tynes." She said, "Does he have a nickname?" "Yeah, he has a nickname. It's Snooky." She's like, "I know him." She goes, "He died a couple years ago, but there's lots of newspaper articles about him. I can get you some information if you like." I said, "Sure." So I really wanted to know about who he was. I figured I must have gotten some of my independence, some of my ambition, etc. from him, because I didn't see myself really relating to my biological mother. So she agreed to look into it and get back to me in the next few days. Well, lo and behold, less than 2 hours later, my phone rings, and she calls me and says, actually, is anyone here from the East Coast? Anyone at all? A couple. Okay. So you'll know this. She says, "Oh, he's not dead. It's worse. He lives in Toronto." So I thought, oh, okay. I called 411, asked for Charles Tynes. They gave me the number, end of story. Whole process, finding someone, took 3 hours. Well, 28 years in 3 hours. So I phoned. Thought I'd better do it quickly before I changed my mind. So I phoned, and a young woman answered the phone. And I asked for Charles Tynes. And she's like, "Why? Why do you want to talk to him?" I'm like, "Well, my name is Rose Adams, and I'm writing a story for my sports and entertainment class on boxers, and I'd like to interview him." And she goes, "Oh, you want Charles Sr." I thought to myself, oh my God, I have a brother, and somebody in that household is jealous. So I left a message, and the next day, Charles Tynes Jr. called me back. He said, "So why do you want to interview my dad?" So I explained the whole story about this article, and then I started to try and ask him a few questions. I said, "So, how many brothers?" Ask my dad. A couple days later, I received a phone call from Charles Tynes Sr. And he was very excited about me wanting to interview him. We made arrangements to meet for lunch about a week and a half after that. I was all excited, and then at 11:30 I got a phone call from him saying, "I'm sorry, I can't make it, something's come up. We'll have to reschedule." We rescheduled for the following evening, and we met. We arranged to meet at 5 o'clock in the lobby of the office that I was working at. I was working downtown at the corner of King and Bay in one of those big, huge office towers. Well, I really think it was the gods or fate that stepped in and was trying to tell me, you cannot. I met him the next day. I'm waiting down in the lobby by the wall with my briefcase. It's 5 o'clock, and the lobby of one of those office towers at 5 o'clock is like Grand Central Station. So I'm pinned against the wall, trying to see if this man is going to show up. There must have been hundreds and hundreds of people passing through there, but slowly the crowd dwindled until there were maybe a dozen. Then it dwindled until there were a few, and then there was just me. So I waited and waited and waited. At about 6 o'clock, I'd pretty much given up. And then, through the revolving door, comes this short little man in a white tracksuit with a young girl behind him. And he comes over to me and says, "Are you Rose Adams?" And I said, "Yes." And what I was really thinking is, "You're short." Because my mother is 5'1". My father's maybe 5'6". So I'm going, obviously grandparents were tall. He introduced himself and he said, "I'm sorry I'm late, but I didn't think you would want to have dinner with a strange old man by yourself, so I brought my daughter along." And in tow, he had 13-year-old Robin. So up until that moment, I had already decided I was not going to tell him who I was. I just wanted to find out about him. I was being kind of selfish. As soon as I saw him walk through the turnstile with Robin, all that went out the window, and I knew I was going to tell him. It was just a matter of when. Well, we walked a few doors over to the King Edward Hotel and went into this swanky restaurant for dinner. And Robin was overwhelmed. She was like, "Wow, I've never had tablecloth and cloth napkins before." And she didn't want to wipe her hands or her face on her napkin to make it dirty. She was very excited. We ordered our dinner, and as we were finishing ordering, Snooky says to the waiter, "Do you know who this is?" We were sitting in a booth, and I was directly across from him. The waiter looks at me, shakes his head, no. And Snooky says, "She's a law student." Now, Prince Charles has eaten at the King Edward Hotel. This waiter doesn't give two hoots that I'm a law student having dinner there. He just kind of shrugs and walks away. And Robin says to me, "Is it hard to become a lawyer? I want to become a lawyer. You're so..." Man. So we proceeded to have dinner, and Snooky puts on the table a grocery bag. Actually, it was double bagged, and he had photo albums and newspaper clippings. He even had a VHS cassette. And I'm thinking, we're in a restaurant, and this briefcase does not have a VCR in it. But he was so excited to share with me all his information. And he pulls out newspaper clippings about how he was the coach of the first ever black women's basketball team in Nova Scotia. He was the first black man to play ice hockey in Halifax. He was Golden Gloves champion in welterweight, I think, boxing. And all these newspaper clippings and photo albums. And then I said, as he turned the page of this photo album, "Well, who's that?" And he says, "Oh, that's my daughter, Agnes." And I said, "Well, who's that?" "Well, that's my son, Frank, Fred, Helen, Veronica, Danny, Donald, Dorothy, Robert, Roland, Patsy, and Chuck." I went, "Ah, I talked to Chuck." Then he turns the page, and I went, "Who's that?" And Robin says, "Oh, that's our sister Roseanne. We've never met her, but someday we will." And I said, "Well, if you've never met her, how come you have a picture of her?" And Snooky explained, well, one of her mother's friends got this picture when she was in grade 2 and sent it to me. She knew I'd want one. I tried to reach her once, But her mother said no and told me I would be in for the fight of my life if I did. So I just stayed away. And then Robin piped up and said, "Yeah, we have the same picture, this big, on the wall in our living room with all the other family photos." And then she looks at me and she says, "I wish you were my sister." And just then the waiter came to the table, and Snooky says to the waiter, "Do you know who this is?" The waiter shakes his head, "No." And Snooky says, "She's a law student, and she's writing an article about me." The waiter goes, "Is your food all right? Can I get you anything?" "No." "Okay, bye." And away he goes. I finished dinner. Snooky was barely through his because he was doing a lot of talking. So I excused myself, and Robin came with me, and we went down to the washroom. And after washing our hands, I put on some lipstick, and I put some on her. And she says, "You really are cool, and it would really be nice if you were my sister. Someday, I want to finish high school and go on and do something with myself." We go back upstairs, and I sit down. Oh, I forgot to tell you that during dinner, I wasn't being very subtle. I said to Snooky, "So, my father was a boxer." And he said, "Oh, that's nice, dear." And he kept showing me his photo albums. I waited about 10 minutes, and I actually said to him again, "Well, you know, my father was a boxer." Totally went right over his head. So here we finished dinner, we're sitting down, I'm going, okay, subtle doesn't work with this man. So I said to him, "Do you mind if I say something?" And he goes, "Oh, yes, dear, yes, yes." I said, "Well, do you remember when I said my father was a boxer?" "You did?" "Oh, what was his name? Maybe I know him." And he finished that sentence, and he picked up his fork full of rice and salmon. I remember vividly what he was having for dinner. And as he was about to take a bite, I said to him, "Well, my mother's name is Sharon Gendron." And he dropped his fork, and he looked at me, and he said, "Are you Roseanne?" And Robin screams, "Oh my God, you are my sister!" And at that very moment, the waiter came back to the table. And Snooky grabbed the waiter by his arm and said, "Do you know who this is?" And the waiter said, "Yes, she's a law student and she's writing an article about you." And Snooky said, "No." He said, "She's my daughter. Not my almost daughter, not my sort of daughter, my daughter." And that's the first time anyone had called me that. And I was 28 years old. Okay, breathe. But I'm almost out of time, and I'm not going to leave you on a sad note. Certainly wasn't a sad note for me. I have a huge family with lots of siblings, and we get along extremely well. I'm also happy to say that on April 4th, 2004, 04, I had an opportunity to spend some time with Bernice Adams for the first time. It was 2 weeks before my 40th birthday, and we had never been alone in the same room since I was 19, since that summer. And we were driving in my car on the way to Toronto, and we were talking, and I was telling her about some of the things I had accomplished in my life. And she said, "Well, I would like to think that I had something to do with your success." And I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. And I had waited so long to give her a piece of my mind and explain to her how much she had hurt me and how much pain I had been in. I wanted to tell her that For years, until I was 25, I used to cry in my sleep. I wanted to tell her that I was alone and afraid, and she had caused all that pain, and I wanted to make her feel as bad as I felt. But she said to me, "But you know what? I can't take credit for the person you've become, because I'm afraid I was not a very good mother, and I'm sorry." And instantly, every ounce of anger and hurt I had was gone. Absolutely gone. Her sincerity was all it took. And we remained really, really close until this past September when she died of cancer. And I spent the last week of her life sitting by her bed, and she said to me, "Why are you here? I don't deserve to have you here." And I told her, "There's nowhere else I need to be." So it works out in the end, and it only worked out because I let go of the anger. Now, one last thing. For those of you, like my friend Mary, taking the pictures, for those of you who know the process of becoming a lawyer, after your 3 years of law school, and then your year of articling where you work in a law office, and then your 4 months of bar exams, comes the big day. February 7, 1996, the day I became a lawyer. I'm in Roy Thompson Hall with thousands of people, and there are several hundred of us becoming lawyers that day. So the people at the beginning of the alphabet were ushered off to the side of the stage. And on the stage were rows and rows of dignitaries and then the Law Society officials. And there was this person here who hands you your diploma, and then this person here who shakes your hand, and then this person here who says something that I can't possibly remember. Then the person at the end of the line takes your sash that's over on this side and puts it over on this side, and that's the instant you become a lawyer. So that person is the CEO of the Law Society. So I'm in the sidelines, and there were only 2 or 3 people ahead of me, because I'm an Adams. And as I walked across the stage and shook hands and said this and did that, I got to the last person. And when he put the sash from my side to the other side, and I stuck out my hand, he brushed it away and gave me a great big hug. And he whispered in my ear, "I knew you could do it." That man was the new CEO of the Law Society. Before that job, he was the president of Niagara College. Before that job, he was the vice president of administration at Georgian College. The very man who pronounced me a lawyer was John Say-So, the person who told me I was not limited by anyone else's expectations. That's the kind of impact every one of you in this room can have on a college student. Thank you.
I have been at college almost 30 years, those of you who don't know me, I'm Penny Harris, and I have been to many college functions, taught for 10 years, so had a whole lot of classes of my own, and never in my 30 years have I heard this size of group hang on every word like we just did for an hour. So I thank you, Rose, from the organizing committee. You proved that we made the best choice in asking you to come and share your story as maybe not so typical a story of a college student and the possibilities in life and the possibilities that we bring to our students' lives and to each other. So thank you on behalf of all of us.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
That was really well. That was really well done.
Thank you.
We have a connection. John Saso was the first person that hired me when I went to Georgian College.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Isn't he
So I
awesome?
remember being in this audience when you won the Premier Award. So it was excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Good luck with your marriage.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Really great.
Sorry.
Thanks. Thank you.
What law firm do you work for?
I have my own practice.
You have any dealings with Tracy Arkell at Grand
Yes, all the time.
My daughter.
Is she really? I practice real estate. I deal with her all the time. And she has a child at Codrington Street Public School, doesn't she?
The first one.
Yes.
The second one will be coming.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, say hi if you see her.
I
Or I
will.
do. I'm not up there a lot.
Okay. Nice to meet you. I'm sorry, your first name is?
Dawn.
Dawn. Nice to meet you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I cried through most of it, but in a good way. That was very, very moving.
Thank you. What do you do with the college?
Well, I'm retired now, but I was in marketing. But I'm happily retired.
Yes. Good. Well, enjoy.
I am.
Okay. Thanks. Hi, Sue.
My name is Sarah. I'm
Hi.
one of the students.
Oh, are you?
I just want to say thank you. That was really inspirational.
Oh, you're welcome.
You're so brave for being able to come up here and share your story like that.
Thank you. Thank you. What are you taking here?
Vet tech.
Yeah? Oh, excellent. Excellent. So do you want to own your own someday?
I thought about becoming a vet, but I really like the nursing aspect
Yeah.
of the field, so that's really what my goal is.
Are you going to stay in the Kingston area?
I'm actually from Oshawa, so
Oh, yeah?
I'll probably go back to the GTA and
Yeah.
maybe become a behavioralist or something
Yeah.
like that. But I just really wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Congratulations on
Thanks.
the wedding.
Thanks.
Enjoy.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
I just want
Hello.
to say thank you for sharing your story. I thought it was inspirational.
Thank
and,
you.
Really, thank you.
Yeah. What do you do here at the college?
I'm market research, but I'm an alumni of Georgian as well. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, from the area, and or not from the area, but I spent a couple of years when you said the Queen's Hotel. I had a little
Oh, yeah.
good and bad, Brookdale, all those fun
Yes.
times.
I did coat check at the Brookdale
Did
one
you?
year. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's too funny.
Back
So-
when it wasn't the King's Buffet Chinese restaurant.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. That
That's
must
what
have
it
been
is
before me.
now.
Oh.
No,
Oh,
that's what it is now. Yeah.
Is Berry Burger still there?
No, up on Bayfield Street? No, they have one in this on Essa Road, but it's not the same.
Oh, I haven't been there in
No.
years and years and years. But,
That's why we used to leave the hotel, leave the Queens, go to Berry Burger. Yeah.
get the fill. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
All the best.
Thanks, Heather.
Bye-bye. Butter?
It's okay.
Way to go. Holy crow. I almost started crying, for God's sake. You can't do that.
So that's 040404. So that was just my story.
Very good. We can come on the cruise now.
Okay. So yeah, that's my story.
God fashioned it for you alone. God fashioned it for you alone.
Oh my God, Paul, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.